Hello. Hey, dude.
Hi,
What you
how are
doing,
you?
Ed?
You okay?
Yeah, we're good. Nice to see
Awesome.
you again. You brought some
Nice to
sleep.
see you again. Yeah, did you? Didn't go
Yeah,
out partying?
we all slept in a big tent together. That's how we do post shooting bonding.
Boys in the boat camping. I like
Boys
that.
in the tent. That's the sequel.
That's the sequel.
We
I
were
like
attacked
that.
by a bear. Cocaine bear. Okay, I do. Love it.
Oh, someone's going to make that. Listen, I want to talk about music if that's all right, because
Yeah, it's great. We love it.
uh, working with Alexander Desplat again on this film. Is this your like fifth or sixth time
Yeah.
working with him?
I worked with him before I was directing when we were producing for Syriana, I think was the
Oh
first one.
wow.
And he's just he's an amazing composer. And then everything we did with him, I've done every film except for the first two. The first one, it wasn't with him, and then the second one, we didn't have a composer, we didn't have a score. After that, it's just been Alexander the whole way. He's just he's a force of nature, and he and his wife Solray, who sort of runs the orchestra along the way. And it's fun. We go over to Abbey Road. In fact, my first date with my wife, you'll enjoy this. I met Amal in Italy. She came with a friend over to my house in Italy, just on her way through. And we were talking, and we got along really well. And we just would write each other. And then I was coming to London to score Monuments, and she was she was in London, in some meeting with the Muslim Brotherhood, some fight with the Muslim Brotherhood. And I called her and said, "Well, I'm in London. Why don't you come over to Abbey Road?" I figured if you could ever impress anybody, it's at Abbey Road with a 150-piece orchestra,
That's a
And she
good
came
date.
over, and that was our first date. So,
Wow.
some first date, huh? Yeah, not
Yeah,
bad.
some for say you're such a romantic as well. It's like, oh.
Well, think about her taxi ride over, though. She's leaving the Muslim Brotherhood. Yeah. Take me to Abbey Road.
Callum, were you privy to kind of the sound of this film? Because one of the things that Alexander's done with this film, with the music of this film, is it kind of really reiterates this beautiful kind of almost old school Hollywood nature of this film, and that it's got a really lovely kind of embrace of that whole kind of era, I think, as well. And I wondered whether it was something that George kind of explain to you, or let you hear some ideas of what he was thinking of sonically.
Not musically, but definitely we lent into the idea of that old school Hollywood, the classic nature, and the people like Gary Cooper and Spencer Tracy and the whole era itself. I listen to, actually, the thing that I do is for me it's all about energy. I don't try to imitate. I just try to, like, sort of, for my body, I would follow his diet and how he trained, and I would let my body manifest itself rather than try and match his thing to fit a round peg into a square hole. But something that I did with the music, which I like to do, is I listen to Woody Guthrie every morning. Yeah, and so I would listen to Your Land Is Our Land every morning, and that was sort of my kick into Joe Rance
And the depression.
Because Woody Guthrie, I mean, that was that movie I watched about him. And he sort of, in a sense, has a similar journey to Joe, maybe as an older man, but he was a traveler, right? He was always on the move.
He was nominated the same year as All the President's Men, Network, Bound for Glory.
That's right. Yeah.
Wow.
There's an essence to Joe. Joe from a young age was, I think, at 4 years old, he was made to go and live with his aunt on the other side of America, put on a train on his own, picked up in a station somewhere, and then came back, and they had to move to this mining town.
And lived in a house up above.
That's right, yeah. And then his stepmother, Dula, didn't want him to live in the house. So he had to go and live in the workhouse, and he had to work as a 6 and 7 year old. Just for food,
yeah,
just to keep him.
I'll tell you an interesting thing too, that he probably doesn't know yet, but we also, we write, and this is how Alexander works. He writes themes for characters. And so there's a love theme for them that plays when they're in the boat. It plays a little bit, and it plays big time in the first kiss in the room.
Train station, yeah.
No, and then it comes
and then
blasting out, full orchestration before it's kind of very simple.
Orchestration is the same.
So it's the same song. It's just build up with a different thing, and we do the same thing with the rowing. There's a different kind of rhythm to it, but it's all kind of the same heroic music. It just gets bigger, you know. But
so funny. They did that with the Full Monty too.
Oh
yeah.
You gotta do that.
Yeah, I guess it's a familiarity.
Callum, did you, just in terms of that choice of what this, you know, kind of artist and that you were listening to, did you find any evidence that he was a fan of that type of music, or what he listened to, you know, musically or anything?
No, I didn't actually. I didn't.
He didn't care. Let's face it. He was just doing his own thing. It made him happy, you know. We just let him. Yeah. We also played a lot of Dinah Ross in his ear too, just to keep him like dancing.
Right.
That's whole routine, right?
Chain reaction.
Yeah,
that's for the premiere.
Okay, we'll say that.
But the score starts, you know, kind of straight away. It kind of opens with music. The film. Yeah. We have this kind of beautiful kind of piano and strings this, and it immediately kind of creates a rhythm. It creates a mood as well. You know, I think as well. It's a lovely kind of.
I for most of the films I do, I don't do an opening. Do you hear a siren, by the way?
It's fine. Don't worry.
It's my ride here. There's I don't normally do opening credits sequences. I like to go right in the movie and do the credits at the end. But this one felt like we wanted to set the world of rowing and make it elegant. So we shot it out on the Thames, you know, late at night and early in the morning. So we had those beautiful shots. And then I went to Alexander and said, we need something to get us into the game, which is, you can't start it emotional, because it's not. You got to give ourselves a go. But it can't just be goofy light either. You know, there has to be something sort of melodic about it. And he's the maestro at it. And, you know, I've had him act in movies too. You know, he played a French guy, which is very weird.
He's so believable. I mean, well done. But I love as well kind of the music for the character Dawn, you know, of kind of what the piano and being able to play the piano does for that as a character. You know, it's kind of like it's so lovely, that kind of almost comfort blanket for him, or this kind of confidence that he gets from it as well.
So that wasn't that whole, you know, Ain't We Got Fun moment wasn't in the script. I started looking back depression wise, what was the songs that were really, you know, the people who lost everything crapping all over the people who still had it. And, you know, the rich get rich and the poor get poorer is such a great, it was a real great chant. And so then we wrote the scene for him doing it when you guys were mopping up, playing the piano just a little bit. And he had to learn how to play the piano for that. And then the second time when it's the big party and he starts to play it, kind of gave them we're trying to build something. We always had a problem with how do you get him when he's rowing in the last race? What's the thing that jogs his head out of it? And so we set it up to give ourselves something to sort of trigger it.
But that middle section, I think, is my favorite part.
It's fun, man. When they pull him up on the stage.
No. Actor too, Jack. He lost the most amount of weight because at the final race, he does get sick, and Hume lost a lot of weight in that journey over to Germany. And he's a remarkable actor.
He's a good cat too. These two were fighting all the time because they were rowing against each other. So they've been best friends, and then they would just scream.
Because in a sense because he's the stroke and I'm sending the stroke down to well, not the leaders of the boat, but we're setting the tone. So it felt like there was more pressure on both of us, and
well, also
we weren't the best.
In fairness, and this is true, it was mostly his fault.
You get a hard time from him, Callum. He's constantly giving you a hard time.
True. That's not
but it is true.
But Jack and I, we really did, because we were part of a team, you know, and that's what happens in sports teams. You're all trying to be, you're pulling in the same direction, you're trying to achieve the same thing, and if you feel like you know, and obviously in the wrong, you know better, you're going to go at each other.
Well, it was kind of the theme of the movie, right? Which is the flaw is when each of you thinks you know better. And the secret to it was when you stopped that. And these guys had to experience that in real life, which is, you know, each of them were improving at different paces. And Jack was one of the last to get into the rhythm of it really well. And he was playing the stroke, who's supposed to be sort of the best at it. It took him a little bit longer to get into the right rhythm. The guy right behind him, Bruce, was like the killer. Everybody loved him. You know, you're great.
The god of rowing.
Yeah,
behind me.
They were like, you know, he could really row.
I know.
I was like, shut up.
I think that's going to be the thing that surprises people though as well, when you kind of, because, you know, I think that people will just assume that, oh yeah, you kind of, you know, that they didn't really row, they didn't really, you know, it's like, no, you really did. And not just that, but, you know, it was lovely chatting to you about it last night at the Q&A, but that idea that it was kind of, you know, art, life imitating art in a way, in terms of you guys had to work hard as a team. So kind of, you know, in real life you were doing that, and I guess it really benefited in terms of that camaraderie on screen as well.
We were a unit for 5 months. You know, we really fell in love with each other, and like George says, we were moving at different paces, and we had to just have allowances for each other, and we were all learning a new skill. And you know what we were able to achieve was nothing short of remarkable.
Honestly,
you know,
it really is. I have footage I can show you. I have footage of that first day we went out to see them.
How'd you say that?
I really did. And literally, at one point, I'm shooting it on my phone like this, and they're like, blah, 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 blah. The oars are going back and forth like a dying duck. And then I just panned over to Grant's face, and Grant's like this. Horrible smile on his face. I was like,
what have we done?
The fear that was resonating towards the boat. We all really understood how bad we were in that moment. But yeah, we did, and there is something like life imitating art, and you know, I think I said this last night. I'm rereading the book, and it's resonating in such a deeper, more profound way, and I realize how special it is what I was able to do with these guys and what I was allowed to do. A lot of people have asked me to row with them because I've done a rowing with them. I don't want to do that because it's not going to be the same. It's not going to. I built a bond with 8 other guys, and we had a target, and we reached it, and it doesn't feel like it's done. But I wouldn't want to do it with anyone else. Actually,
it's a funny thing what we do for a living if you think about it.
Yeah,
we get
these random skills you learn.
We get to learn something that we would never learn. We get to go to a location that you wouldn't vacation in. You know, I've been to like Slovakia and places where you go, I would go to. We get to experience for short periods of time whole worlds that would nothing we would have ever done or known about, and I feel that we're very lucky in that way. We've picked a profession that's kind of fun.
Also, it wouldn't be the same without George on the speedboat alongside us. You know, with the megaphone on,
yelling, "What's wrong with you, buggers?"
Did you have a modern megaphone, or did you have the almost kind of like
I had I had the battery powered one. That's around.
Extra distance.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure it was humiliating to everyone when I do it better.
Yeah. Over and over.
Well, the funniest thing is these guys, they trained, and they finally got great. And then we're shooting the last race. And the first take we do, they're like, and I literally, my head exploded. Because we have like 8 other boats racing, and they're like, I don't know what that was. And I just got it. I go, "Are you out of your minds?" Like in the next race, they were flying, flying.
You know, it was a really spiritual experience, and I remember after putting it together and doing it for George, the last row back. And we rode as slow as possible, and it was just a silent moment, and we were all in it together, and we all knew something, and we would never do it again.
But it was really emotional when we wrapped, and everybody got out and was arguing because these guys actually, they really did go through hell. They were, it was February, and they're in those short shorts rowing. It was hard for them, and so
a few days we were on the water.
Yeah. So it was a real event. So
they set us up to succeed. They really did. They gave us everything to be able to do that.
I love that it's not put you off rowing though. I like the fact that I'm never getting in a boat again, Callum. You're like that. Yeah, no, I mean, I'd do it again, but it's going to be the right.
Yeah, I would want to do it with the guys that and actually, again, life imitating art. Terry O'Neill brought down his mates that he made when he was 14 from Leighton, from their rowing club, and he gave this speech about how you're going to make friends forever, and he cried. And I remember giving him a hug, and then we also got in the boat and rowed terribly, and they were like, "Good luck."
It would be fun for you guys, like after a couple of years, to get in a boat and row.
But like that's what these guys did too.
Yeah, I bet it'd be fun.
Joe Rance and those guys, they met up once a year, and
yeah,
did the thing.
Oh. There's something about sports movies, isn't there? There's something about sports movies that I don't know. It kind of follows, I guess, that thing of the underdog. You know, you're always rooting for the underdog. You know, kind of. You know, I think back to even things like Gregory's Girl when I was growing up in Scotland. You know, great kind of little football film from Scotland, but you know, stuff like Cool Runnings or documentaries like Senna and Maradona and things like that. There's just sport just has this kind of. You don't have to be into the sport to love it and to fall in love with these stories and these people.
Even if you don't know anything about basketball, I'll give you a suggestion. If you don't know anything about basketball at all, there's an hour-and-a-half documentary, 30 for 30, which is ESPN does these documentaries. They're called 30 for 30. And there's one called Survive and Advance. And the reason if you know nothing about basketball, you watch this documentary, you're laughing hysterically, you're sobbing. It's this, you know, North Carolina State basketball team that have no business playing against the greatest basketball players ever. Michael Jordan is playing with North Carolina, and Clyde Drexler and Hakeem Olajuwon are playing with Hughes. Some of the greatest of all time are playing in college, and these guys who have nobody have a terrible season, but they win their division at the last minute, and they get into the NCAAs, and every single game they're down by 15 with 2 minutes left, and they come and they win the national championship. And the coach is from like New York, and he talks like this down in the South, and they're all like, "Well, this guy, he talk funny," and he's like, "Man, listen, you kids." And it never happened again. And it's one of the most beautiful stories. And you will sob and you will laugh. And the guy gets cancer and all this stuff. It's just so, and again, it's that same thing. My wife, who knows nothing about basketball, watched it with me, bawling through the whole thing, because it's just such sports films like that, you know, they just raise you up, you know, anything's possible then.
Yeah. Callum, have you got one that springs to mind that's a favorite of yours?
You know, I mean, yeah, Cool Runners was one I loved when I was a kid.
Yeah,
I really did. But Jimmy Grimble, I used to watch that when I was a kid. I watched this movie called Lenny Cook. Have you seen Lenny Cook? Lenny Cook's like the greatest basketball player that never made it. So when he was like the top high school guy in the States, and it's actually the Safdie brothers that made this documentary.
Oh yeah.
And it's fascinating.
Wow.
He's got this God-given talent, but he doesn't have the mental ability to do it. And I think it's LeBron James is younger than him, a year younger, and they're like he's in the documentary.
I want to see it.
It's fascinating. You know, unfortunately, he doesn't make it, but it's just this journey of this young man. It's really beautiful.
What stories are great. They're really fun.
What about when it comes to soundtracks and scores? Have you got kind of moments throughout your life as a film fan that you've got scores or soundtracks that have really resonated with you?
There's one soundtrack that I think I would put above almost anything I've ever heard in my life. You know, and it's constant to me. There's tons of beautiful soundtracks, obviously, and you can listen to some of the older films in particular, you know, mind blowing. But every single moment, particularly end of Cinema Paradiso, absolutely destroys me. Like when I say destroys, you know, I'm old. I fall asleep early, you know, now. It was on the other night. It was like, I turned the TV on at like midnight. I'd been asleep for like an hour. I woke up, I turned the TV on, Cinema Paradiso. I watched it till 3 a.m, and I'm sitting by myself with the remote in my hand, just bawling at that last. Have you ever seen that film?
Yeah.
Oh God, the ending with the clips of all the nudity.
Oh my God.
Oh, it just destroys me, you know. So that's a score for me, that one. You know, there's millions of them, obviously, you know.
Callum, what about you?
Yeah, well, there's a movie to go against like the Hollywood style. There's a movie called Babylon, which is I think it's from 1992 or something, and it's about these reggae artists in London. And Dennis Bobble does the soundtrack, and I've always loved dub music.
Yeah,
And it is a vibe. And there's a
Yeah,
scene
yeah.
right at the end where he goes and he's a dub MC and he goes and does his thing.
it's great.
Yeah, you want to dance.
Yeah.
He's an amazing character. I was lucky enough to I did a little documentary with him that he was in, and he talked about writing silly games.
Right.
And he can't not sing it when you're talking about it, and he can get that note as well that Janet's got. It's amazing. But it's just, he's a phenomenal character.
Recognition again, so that makes me happy.
Did you guys see the Get Back documentary with the?
Yeah.
Have you seen it?
No.
Dude, you got to see it. It's so amazing because you're watching like Paul McCartney just sitting around, and he's writing like Get Back, just sitting around with the rest of the guys, and they're all dicking around with the guitar. And it's like, he's like, Frankie was a man. And we're like, no, it's JoJo. It's JoJo. We know everything. Yeah. And you're on the journey. Like, Larry was a guy who thought, no. And then it's funny, I had dinner a couple of nights ago with Paul, and I was sitting there with him, and there's never been there will never be a band that was around for that short a period of time that had that many amazing songs, who took us from the journey of ties and short hair to changing the world. There'll never be a band like that. And when your third best writer is George Harrison, a songwriter who's one of the greatest, there'll never be anything like it. And Paul, I was sitting there with him, and we're just having drinks, and he's like 80, I think. And he's like talking about like, when we did that horn thing with Penny Lane. And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, yeah, we decided we'd try this like flugelhorn. And I'm just like, really? Just hearing songs that are ingrained in you.
Yeah.
Like in your blood system,
I remember he once
thing.
He once came on my radio show, and there just happened to be a keyboard in the studio, and he just started playing Lady Madonna. Yeah. I literally was, I couldn't breathe. It was just the most extraordinary thing.
It's just amazing. And, particularly their songs, which are such a part of our fabric of our lives, because their music changed as music changed. They were the leaders of changing the style of music. Yeah. And all of the British invasion that came to the United States, they all followed them. They were the first. And so everything they did. So, I was there with him, he was at Abbey Road playing Lady Madonna on the piano that's there that they used when they played Lady Madonna. You're just like, oh my God. That's the stuff. I mean, I was a kid. Oh, it was just.
Did you see the little?
He had this thing, he had Now and Then.
Yeah.
And he says it. He screwed up by saying AI did it. AI wasn't what he's saying is they were using it to take out the background noises, not to redo Lennon's voice, and that's how it got sort of screwed up. But he sent it to me, a year ago, and said, I've got this thing, do you have any place in the movie for it? And I was like, oh my God, if we have anything to do with it, anywhere. But I got to hear it, and I wrote him then, and I said, Jesus, Paul, it's a Beatles song. It's a 50-year-old Beatles song. And he's like, yeah, we rock. And I was like, yeah, you rock, dude. You actually really rock.
I bawled my eyes out at the little documentary that tells you the kind of making of it. It's like a sort of little 10-piece little film of kind of, them, why they wanted to do it, how long it took, them coming back and forward, having this piece that George wrote before he died that they were able to, and it's just, I was.
And that Paul was trying to copy his style of playing, and I mean, it was really, it's just a loving, when you listen to the song, the minute you hear those sort of changes, you go, that's the Beatles.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like the Beatles in 68,
Yeah.
Wow, it's unbelievable.
Just before we finish, I had the absolute pleasure of having a really brilliant chat with David Holmes a couple of weeks ago. He's amazing. And I was and I'd had Soderbergh on the podcast as well, and we talked a lot about the Oceans films. And the great thing about chatting to David was to kind of give him real kind of kudos for how important his music supervision as well as kind of score was to the kind of real rhythm of those films.
Yeah.
You know, in terms of that, the color of them almost in a way, in terms
Yes.
of the kind of the sort of attitude of
It's
them
a
in a way.
completely different film if you don't have David's music in it. It really is, because you know, films like that, you have to tell people that it's okay to laugh. You have to tell people
Yeah.
not to commit a crime, that this is going to be fun, not, well, this is going to be dangerous, you know.
Yeah.
And David's version of that music, because Stephen tried other things before he met David on the first one, and then he came out and said, you know, maybe I think it's this vibe. And the minute, because before that we'd done Out of Sight together, and it was a very different vibe, a lot of needle drop music, you know, which was great. But then this was pure proper score, but it was with a funk to it, you know, that just gave it a vibe that was
What was the
fantastic.
inspiration?
I don't know. I think David was doing kind of it was a 70s vibe. I mean, that's the only way it had
It was real funk, wasn't it? Yeah.
You know,
has it been a brilliant journey for you as a director, George, a producer and director of that journey with music? And you know, because I was looking at all the different scores that, you know, Alexander's worked on, but, you know, also working with Randy Newman and things like that, and Harry and Rupert Gregson, Greg Wilson on Catch-22, you know, and every one of them has got its own thing. Because sometimes, you know, if you work with a composer over a certain amount of time, you know, there's a familiarity there, but everyone has it's so unique and so different. And I just was interested to find out that journey for you, if you've really enjoyed it in terms of kind of, you know, how that's been for you over
well, I honestly, you know, Alexander is a dear friend, you know what I mean? He's really a good pal of mine. We go to dinners together, and I really love the guy. There's an element he has that there's a feeling for storytelling, right? So like, I'll put a temp score in, like we had a temp score for this, and the last race was really action-packed music, you know, and he's like, yeah, no. And I was like, but you know, I mean, you know what I mean, kind of like that. And you know, there's nothing a composer hates. Yeah, there's nothing they hate more than a temp score. I mean, they hate you. You're taking chunks of other people's scores, you know, and slapping it in, and it doesn't fit. But you're trying to give them an idea of what you're looking for. So Alexander basically just turns it down and doesn't listen to anything I send him, and then he goes, I got an idea. Then I go over to his house in LA. He has a little house in LA, and he has a little keyboard, and he'll just play out things, and then we'll go, okay, that's good, and maybe we could use that here. And he goes, yeah, but watch this. And then he'll change it, and he'll be like, now this is, and I'll go, what's that? And he goes, that's the same song as that. That's just different instruments. So he's that kind of an artist. And I've enjoyed every experience I've had with all of the composers, but I've done I literally probably 7 or 8 jobs with Alexander, and every single one of them has just been a joy, you know.
Ides of March was brilliant. Love that.
That score, you know, I went to him and I said, I want like a military, you know, type sound to it. And he's like, yeah. And I mean, he starts it off and it's got this energy to it. So by the time I get into the scene in the downstairs in the kitchen with Ryan Gosling, he makes the scene tense. He does. Music can do that, you know.
It's been so lovely chatting to you about music today and your wonderful film. Callum, I'm really excited to see, you know, what you do next as well, because it's been great to kind of just, you know, when you see your name attached to something, kind of going, oh, brilliant. And you're absolutely fantastic in this. I'm really excited to see what's next. And George, just, you know, I mean, if we look at the list of things that you're either producing, directing or starring in, it's exciting times for us as film fans. So long may it continue, sir. Thank you for your time, guys.
Say, you know, we do these things when our movies come out, and we do these junkets, and we have all these conversations. And there is no one more fun to talk to than you, and you're the best. So we really enjoy it.
Thank you. That's so kind of you to say. Thank you so much. Merry Christmas when it comes as well, guys. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Bye, guys. Bye.